The old pickup truck rattled loudly as it turned into the parking lot of Sterling Global, one of the most powerful corporate headquarters in the city. It was the kind of place where every window shone like polished glass, every entrance smelled faintly of money, and every car in the executive parking area looked like it belonged in a luxury magazine. Black sedans, silver sports cars, electric SUVs with silent engines and tinted windows. Then came the old truck. Its faded blue paint had been scratched by years of weather, work, and long roads. One side mirror was held steady with black tape. The front bumper carried a small dent that had never been fixed. When the engine coughed near the main entrance, several employees turned around. Some smiled, some whispered, a few laughed openly. Behind the wheel sat Elias Rowan, a quiet, single father with tired eyes, rough hands, and a face that looked like it had learned to carry pain without showing it. Beside him on the passenger seat was a small pink lunchbox. It belonged to his 8-year-old daughter, Mila. He had forgotten to drop it off at school that morning. Elias glanced at the clock on the dashboard. If he finished this delivery quickly, he could still make it to Mila's school before lunch break. That was all he cared about. He did not notice the group of executives stepping out of the building, but they noticed him. At the center of them stood Vivian Sterling, Billionaire CEO of Sterling Global. She was young, powerful, elegant, and feared by almost everyone who worked for her. She had built Sterling Global into a billion-dollar empire, and she believed deeply in order, image, discipline, and success. To Vivian, appearances were not small things. They were signals. A clean suit meant discipline. A luxury car meant achievement. A polished office meant power. And an old truck parked near her headquarters meant embarrassment. She paused as Elias drove past the front entrance toward the loading area. One investor raised an eyebrow. "Is that part of the exhibition?" he joked. A few executives laughed. Vivian gave a small, cold smile. "No," she said. "Some people simply don't know where they belong." The words were not loud, but they were loud enough. Elias heard them. His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. For one moment, his eyes lowered to the lunchbox beside him. Then he exhaled slowly and kept driving. He had learned long ago that anger could burn a man from the inside. Dignity was quieter, but stronger. Behind him, Vivian turned away, already forgetting him. She had no idea that the man she had just mocked was connected to the deepest secret in her company's history. And before the day ended, that old truck would bring Sterling Global to its knees. Before we continue, if you believe kindness is more valuable than wealth, and that every person deserves to be judged by their heart instead of what they own, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Single Dad Journey. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories about courage, humility, and second chances to viewers around the world. Elias Rowan had not always lived this simply. Years earlier, his name had appeared on legal documents, investment records, and private foundation papers. But to the people who passed him on the street now, he was just another struggling delivery contractor trying to survive. Every morning, he woke before sunrise, not because he wanted to, but because life gave him no choice. At 5:10 a.m., his alarm rang in the small house he shared with Mila on the edge of town. The house was modest, with old wooden floors, a tiny kitchen, and a narrow hallway lined with photographs. One photograph showed Elias with his wife, Clara, standing beside the same old pickup truck when its paint was still bright. Another showed Clara holding baby Mila, smiling as if the whole world had fit into her arms. Clara had been gone for 5 years. A sudden illness had taken her faster than anyone expected, leaving Elias with grief, hospital bills, and a little girl who still asked why heaven needed her mother more than she did. Elias never had a perfect answer, so he gave Mila everything he could. Breakfast before school, braided hair when she asked, bedtime stories even when he was exhausted, a kiss on the forehead every morning, and a promise, "I'll always come back for you." That morning had begun like every other. Elias made scrambled eggs, packed Mila's school lunch, and fixed the loose strap on her backpack with a needle and thread. Mila sat at the kitchen table, drawing with a blue crayon. She was drawing the truck. Again, "Dad," she said without looking up, "when I grow up, I'm going to buy you a new truck." Elias smiled while pouring orange juice. "What's wrong with this one?" Mila looked at him seriously. "It makes noises like an angry dragon." "That's because it has personality. It also has holes. Those are air vents." Mila giggled, and for a brief second, Elias felt the house grow warm with a kind of happiness that still hurt. Before leaving, Mila placed her drawing on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. The drawing showed Elias, Mila, and the old truck under a yellow sun. Above them, in messy handwriting, she had written, "Dad's truck takes us everywhere." Elias stared at the words longer than he meant to. Then he drove her to school. Only after he arrived at Sterling Global did he realize her lunchbox was still on the passenger seat. He sighed. "Hold on, sweetheart," he whispered. "I'll get it to you." But first, he had to finish the delivery. Inside the back of his truck were several antique wooden display cases, handcrafted by a struggling local workshop called Bennett & Sons. Most companies had stopped buying from small craftsmen like them, choosing cheaper imported pieces instead. Elias had quietly helped Bennett & Sons for years, sending them orders through people who never mentioned his name. Sterling Global had requested display cases for its anniversary exhibition. Elias had offered to deliver them himself because the workshop could not afford a full delivery crew. He did not need attention. He only needed the job done. When Elias reached the loading area, the security guard stepped forward and frowned at the truck. "Delivery entrance is around the back. This is the delivery entrance," Elias said calmly. The guard looked him up and down. "You sure you're at the right building?" Elias handed over the paperwork. The guard barely glanced at it. "These cases are for the executive exhibition?" "Yes." The guard looked toward the old truck again. With that, Elias did not answer. A younger employee nearby laughed under his breath. "Maybe the exhibition theme is poverty." Elias heard that too, but he only opened the truck bed and began unloading the first case. The wood was heavy, carefully carved, beautiful. His late father had taught him how to handle wood like it was alive. "Never rush your hands," his father used to say. "Good things break when handled by careless people." Elias remembered those words as he lifted the case gently down. Then a sharp voice cut through the loading bay. "Who approved this?" Elias turned. A tall man in an expensive gray suit stood behind him. His name was Grant Keller, Sterling Global's operations director. He was the kind of man who smiled upward and stepped downward. To Vivian, he was loyal. To workers, he was cruel. Grant looked at the truck with disgust. "This vehicle cannot remain here. Investors are arriving all day." "I'll unload quickly," Elias said. Grant stepped closer. "This company has standards." Elias nodded once. "So do I." The words were calm, but something in them made Grant's eyes narrow. Before he could reply, Vivian Sterling appeared near the loading bay with 2 investors and several board members. She had come to inspect the final exhibition setup. Grant immediately straightened. "Miss Sterling," he said, "I'm handling this." Vivian looked from Grant to Elias, then to the truck. Again, that cold little smile appeared. "You're the driver from the front entrance." "Yes, ma'am," Elias said. "You caused quite a scene." Elias glanced at the empty loading area. "I was delivering furniture." One investor chuckled. Vivian's tone sharpened. "This building represents excellence. People spend years earning the right to walk through those doors." Elias looked at her, not angrily, but steadily. "I'm not trying to walk through them. I'm just trying to finish my work." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Vivian was not used to being answered without fear. Grant stepped in quickly. "Unload the pieces and leave, and move that truck out of sight." Elias nodded, but before turning away, he said quietly, "Sometimes, the things people hide from sight are the things holding everything together." Vivian's expression changed for half a second. Then she looked away. "To people who fail, she said. Every scratch becomes a story. Elias lowered his eyes. He thought of Clara. He thought of hospital drives in that truck. He thought of Mila, asleep against the window during long nights when Clara was too weak to speak. Then he continued unloading. He had no interest in proving anything to Vivian Sterling, but fate did. The anniversary exhibition was the most important event Sterling Global had hosted in years. The company was celebrating 25 years since its founding. Investors, journalists, partners, board members, and political guests had gathered inside the grand exhibition hall. Huge digital screens displayed Sterling Global's history. There were photographs of early offices, product launches, expansion deals, charity events, and Vivian Sterling standing in front of international business leaders. At the center of the room stood a large imported display structure made of glass, metal, and polished panels. It held rare documents from the company's early days, including its first contract, its first product sketches, and a symbolic timeline of its rise from near bankruptcy to global success. Vivian walked through the hall like a queen surveying her kingdom. Everything had to be perfect. Grant Keller followed her with a tablet in his hand. The investors from Blackstone Row are seated. The press team is ready. The anniversary film begins in 20 minutes. And the donor recognition files? Vivian asked. Accounting is preparing the final archive. Vivian nodded. That archive mattered. There was one piece of Sterling Global's history that had always bothered her. When her father founded the company, Sterling Global had almost collapsed within its first few years. Then, suddenly, a mysterious private foundation purchased the company's failing debt and gave it enough time to survive. No one had ever publicly identified the benefactor. Vivian had searched for the answer many times, but the records were buried under old legal layers. Her father, Harrison Sterling, had refused to speak of it. All you need to know, he once told her, is that someone believed in us when no one else did. Vivian hated answers like that. To her, success belonged to those who earned it, not to ghosts. Across the hall, Elias finished placing the last wooden display case near a side wall. Unlike the imported centerpiece, these cases were simple, warm, and handmade. Several guests paused to admire them. One elderly board member, Arthur Bell, touched the carved edge of one case with surprise. "This is real walnut," he murmured. Elias nodded. Bennett and Sons. 3 generations of craftsmen. Arthur studied him. "You know wood." "A little." Arthur smiled faintly. "People who say a little usually know more than the ones who say expert." Elias did not respond, but he gave a respectful nod. At that moment, Mila's school called. Elias stepped aside and answered. "Mr. Rowan," the teacher said, "Mila doesn't have her lunch today. She said you might bring it." "I will," Elias said. "Please tell her I'm sorry. I'll be there soon." He looked toward the exit, but before he could leave, a sharp cracking sound echoed across the hall. Everyone turned. The imported glass and metal display structure trembled. One of its support joints had slipped. A panel tilted forward. Then another. A woman screamed. "Get back!" someone shouted. The entire structure began to collapse. Security rushed in. Technicians ran toward it. Executives panicked. The investors stepped away, faces pale. The centerpiece of Sterling Global's anniversary exhibition was falling apart in front of everyone. Vivian froze. For 1 second, she looked less like a CEO and more like a terrified daughter, watching her father's legacy crash to the floor. Grant shouted into his phone, "Get the installation team back here now." "They're 2 hours away," someone answered. "We don't have 2 hours." Glass cracked. A metal beam twisted. The rare documents inside the structure were at risk of being destroyed. Elias moved before anyone asked him. He crossed the hall quickly, picked up a fallen support bracket, and examined the joint. A technician blocked him. "Sir, step back." Elias looked at the failing frame. "That brace is carrying weight in the wrong direction. If it shifts another inch, the whole left side will go." The technician hesitated. Grant shouted, "Who let him near that?" Elias ignored him. He turned to a nearby worker. "Do you have clamps?" The worker blinked. "What?" "Clamps, rope, a drill, 2 flathead screws, and someone strong enough to hold that beam steady for 30 seconds. Vivian stared. "You're a delivery driver." Elias looked at her. "Right now, I'm the only person standing close enough to stop it." Another loud crack filled the room. Vivian's face changed. "Give him what he asked for." Grant looked horrified. "Miss Sterling, now." Within minutes, Elias had climbed onto a small platform beside the structure. His movements were careful, not rushed. He touched the frame the way a doctor might touch a broken bone. He found the weak point. Not in the metal, in the design. "This was built to look strong," he said, "not to carry real pressure." Vivian heard the words and felt them land somewhere deeper than she wanted. Elias took tools from his truck. Old tools, scratch tools. Tools that looked embarrassing beside Sterling Global's polished equipment. But in his hands, they worked like extensions of memory. He reinforced the failing brace with wood from an unused packing frame, redirected the weight, tightened the joint, and secured the structure just as the left panel began to drop. The room held its breath. Then the structure stopped moving. Silence. A technician tested the frame. "It's stable," he said, stunned. "It's completely stable." Applause broke out, first from the workers, then from the guests, then from the investors. Vivian stood motionless. The man she had mocked had just saved her exhibition, her anniversary event, and possibly millions of dollars in investor confidence. Arthur Bell walked toward Elias. That was not ordinary repair work. Elias stepped down from the platform. "It was just a pressure problem." Arthur looked at his hands. "No, that was experience." Vivian approached slowly. "Mr. Rowan," Elias said. "Elias Rowan." For the first time that day, Vivian looked directly at him. "Thank you, Mr. Rowan." Her voice was polite, but pride still guarded it. "You saved us from a serious embarrassment." Elias wiped dust from his sleeve. "I'm glad the documents weren't damaged." Grant forced a smile. "Yes, very helpful." Now if the driver could finish his delivery and move his vehicle. Arthur turned sharply. "Grant." The operations director stopped. Vivian said nothing. Elias looked at the clock. "I need to take my daughter her lunch." Vivian blinked. "Your daughter?" "Yes." Something about the simplicity of his answer made the room feel smaller. Elias picked up the pink lunchbox from the truck seat and began walking toward the exit. Arthur Bell watched him leave. Then he whispered something that changed everything. "Rowan." Vivian turned. "What did you say?" Arthur's eyes narrowed with memory. "Elias Rowan. I've heard that name before." Grant laughed nervously. "It's a common name." Arthur did not look convinced. "No," he said. "Not to this company." The anniversary presentation resumed, but Vivian could not concentrate. Guests smiled. Cameras flashed. Investors praised the quick recovery. The repaired display structure stood stronger than before, and people kept talking about the quiet delivery driver who had saved the event. Vivian hated that, not because Elias had helped, but because he had made her wrong. And Vivian Sterling did not like being wrong. As the anniversary film played across the giant screen, images of the company's early days appeared. A small rented office, her father standing beside old machines, the first employees gathered around a wooden table. Then came the section about the crisis year. The narrator said, "In its earliest days, Sterling Global nearly disappeared. But through an unexpected private investment, the company found the time and stability it needed to rebuild." Vivian looked toward Arthur Bell. He was not watching the screen. He was staring at the wooden display cases. Elias had delivered. After the presentation, Vivian went to the private conference room where the accounting team had spread old foundation documents across the table. "Find the name," she said. The chief accountant, Denise Ward, looked nervous. "We've tried before. Try again." Denise adjusted her glasses. "These documents are old. Many were processed through legal representatives." Vivian pointed to the screen. "For 25 years, this company has thanked an anonymous foundation. I want to know who it was." Grant stood near the door, arms folded. Vivian, with respect, this may not be the right time. Investors are downstairs. She ignored him. Arthur entered quietly behind them. I may be able to help. Vivian turned. What do you remember? Arthur walked to the table and picked up one old photocopy. Your father never told the full board, but I remember the night we were about to lose everything. Payroll was late. Creditors were calling. Banks refused to extend us another dollar. Vivian listened, tense. Then a private trust appeared. Arthur continued. It bought the debt, extended the terms, and refused control. No board seat, no public announcement, no conditions, except one. What condition? Arthur's voice softened. That if Sterling Global survived, it should one day help others survive too. Vivian frowned. That sounds sentimental. It saved us. Denise suddenly stopped flipping through pages. Wait. Everyone turned. She lifted a document from beneath a stack of shipping paperwork. This came attached to today's delivery invoice. It's a foundation verification form from Bennett and Sons. Grant rolled his eyes. What does a furniture workshop have to do with this? Denise stared at the signature line. Her face went pale. Vivian. What? Denise placed the paper in front of her. The signature read, Elias Rowan. Vivian stared at it. For a moment, the room made no sound. Then Grant laughed. That proves nothing. He delivered furniture from a workshop. Maybe he signed as a courier. Denise shook her head slowly. No, this is not a courier signature. This is an authorization signature for a charitable procurement trust. Arthur stepped closer. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the paper. May God. Vivian looked at him. What? Arthur whispered. Rowan Foundation. Denise opened another file on her laptop and searched through the archived company rescue documents. The room waited. Vivian felt irritation rising inside her. It was impossible. Elias Rowan was a delivery contractor. His truck looked ready to fall apart. His gloves were patched. His lunch came in a brown paper bag. He could not be connected to the foundation that saved Sterling Global. He could not be the reason her company existed. Denise found the old record. Debt acquisition. Private trust. No public claim. Authorized representative. She turned the laptop around. There it was again. Rowan. Vivian stepped back. No. May. Arthur looked at her with sadness. Yes. Grant moved forward quickly. This is absurd. Anyone can share initials. We need verification. Denise nodded. I'll call legal archives. Do it, Vivian said. Her voice was sharp, but underneath it something had begun to crack. While Denise made the call, Vivian walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. Far below, she saw the old blue truck parked near the loading area. It looked even smaller from above. For the first time that day, she did not see rust. She saw a question. Who was Elias Rowan? And why had a man who might have saved a billion-dollar company arrived in a truck that everyone laughed at? Denise ended the call 15 minutes later. Her voice was almost a whisper. It's confirmed. Vivian did not turn around. Denise continued. The original trust was managed by Rowan Family Investments. After the death of his wife, Elias Rowan transferred most of his assets into charitable trusts. One of those trusts rescued Sterling Global during its collapse. Arthur closed his eyes. I knew Harrison wanted to thank him publicly. Why didn't he? Vivian asked. Because Elias refused. Vivian turned slowly. Refused? Arthur nodded. He said a rescue should not become a performance. Grant's face tightened. Vivian looked down again at the truck. The same truck she had mocked. The same man she had dismissed. The same quiet father who had calmly repaired her display while she treated him like an embarrassment. For the first time in years, Vivian Sterling felt small. Elias was not in the building when Vivian went looking for him. He had already driven to Mila's school, delivered her lunchbox, hugged her through the fence, and promised he would pick her up after dismissal. Did the dragon truck behave? Mila asked. Mostly. Did the rich people like the wooden cases? Elias smiled faintly. Some of them did. Did they like you? He paused. Children often ask the simplest questions with the sharpest edges. I did my job, he said. Mila touched his hand through the fence. Mom said doing good things still matters even when people don't clap. Elias swallowed. She was right. When he returned to Sterling Global, he did not go inside. He parked under a tree at the edge of the property, where the building's shadow did not reach. He sat on a bench near a small public park and opened his homemade lunch. A simple sandwich, an apple, a bottle of water. His patched work gloves rested beside him. He had just taken one bite when he heard footsteps. Vivian Sterling stood a few feet away. For once, no assistants followed her. No executives, no investors, no cameras. Just Vivian. She looked different outside the building. Less untouchable. "Mr. Rowan," she said. Elias stood politely. "Miss Sterling, may I sit?" He seemed surprised, but nodded. She sat on the far end of the bench, leaving space between them. For several seconds, neither spoke. Children laughed in the park nearby. Cars moved along the street. A breeze stirred the leaves above them. Vivian looked at the lunch in his hand. "You bring your own lunch?" "Yes." "Every day?" "Most days." She nodded, though she did not know why the detail hurt. Then she said, "I know who you are." Elias looked at her calmly. "I'm Mila's father." Vivian lowered her eyes. "And the man who saved Sterling Global." He did not deny it. "That made it worse. Why didn't you say anything? Would it have changed how you treated me this morning?" The question was soft. Vivian had no answer. Elias looked toward the park. "I didn't come here to be recognized. I came to deliver furniture for people who needed the work. You saved my company. I helped your father's company survive. My company exists because of you." "No," Elias said gently. "It exists because many people worked hard after getting one more chance." Vivian turned toward him. "But you gave that chance." Elias was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "After Clara died, people kept telling me what I should do with my life. Sell the house, hire help, return to business, build the family company again, be practical." His voice remained steady, but Vivian could hear the grief beneath it. "But every time I looked at Mila, I understood something. Money could buy care, but it could not become a father. It could buy a bigger house, but not a warmer home. It could buy a new truck, but not the memories inside the old one." Vivian looked at the blue pickup. Elias followed her gaze. That truck took Clara to every treatment. It brought Mila home from the hospital when she was born. It carried food to families who needed help. It carried furniture from workshops no one else would hire. It has broken down more times than I can count. A faint smile touched his face. "But it never left us." Vivian's throat tightened. "This morning, I laughed at it. Yes. And I judged you. Yes. I'm sorry." Elias looked at her, not proudly, not bitterly, just honestly. "Then let it teach you something." Vivian blinked. "What?" "Don't apologize only to the person you discovered was important. Apologize to the next person before you know who they are." The word struck her harder than any accusation could have. She had spent years building a company around excellence, but somewhere along the way, excellence had become arrogance, standards had become cruelty, image had become blindness. Vivian looked at the building behind them. "I thought success meant never needing anyone." Elias shook his head. "Success means understanding how many people carried you when you couldn't stand alone." For the first time since she became CEO, Vivian Sterling did not know what to say. The next morning, Vivian called an emergency leadership meeting. Grant Keller arrived confident, assuming the meeting was about investor praise from the anniversary event. Instead, the first slide on the conference screen showed a photograph of Elias's old truck. Several executives shifted uncomfortably. Vivian stood at the head of the table. "Yesterday morning, I mocked this truck. No one spoke. I did it in front of investors, employees, and guests. Some of you laughed." Grant cleared his throat. "Vivian, I don't think this requires." She cut him off. "It does." Her voice was calm but cold. "This truck belongs to Elias Rowan, the man whose private trust rescued Sterling Global when this company was days away from collapse. The room went still. A few executives looked at each other in shock. Grant's face drained of color. Vivian continued. He asked for no recognition, no control, no public credit. He simply gave this company a chance to survive. She clicked to the next slide. It showed Bennett and Sons, the local workshop that made the wooden display cases. Yesterday, while we displayed our success, we nearly ignored the people who still build things with their hands. We treated a craftsman's delivery as an embarrassment, while an imported structure collapsed in the middle of our celebration. Arthur Bell sat quietly near the end of the table, watching her with approval. Vivian looked directly at Grant. Our culture has become polished on the surface and weak at the joints. Grant stiffened. Are you blaming leadership for a delivery issue? I'm blaming leadership for forgetting respect. No one moved. Vivian clicked again. The next slide read, the Clara Rowan Initiative. Our company will launch a new program supporting single parents, trade workers, local craftsmen, and small businesses at risk of being crushed by systems that overlook them. Denise smiled faintly. Vivian continued. The program will provide emergency grants, childcare support, procurement contracts, and mentorship for small family businesses. Grant leaned forward. With what budget? Vivian looked at him. With the bonus pool allocated for executive image campaigns. A few people inhaled sharply. Grant's jaw tightened. That will not be popular upstairs. Vivian's eyes did not move. Then upstairs can learn humility. Arthur smiled. For the first time, several employees in the room looked at Vivian not with fear, but with respect. But Vivian was not finished. She turned to Grant again. Yesterday, you tried to remove Mr. Rowan from the property after he saved our exhibition. You insulted his vehicle, dismissed his work, and treated him like a problem because he did not look successful enough for you. Grant forced a laugh. I was protecting the company's image. Vivian nodded. And that is exactly the problem. By the end of the meeting, Grant Keller was removed from direct operations pending review. New policies were ordered for contractor treatment, vendor respect, and staff conduct. But Vivian knew policies were not enough. A company could write beautiful words and still have an ugly heart. So she did something harder. She changed herself first. That afternoon, she stood in the lobby as deliveries arrived. She greeted vendors by name. She thanked cleaners, security guards, technicians, and reception staff. At first, employees thought it was a performance. Then she kept doing it. Day after day, week after week. Slowly, the building changed. People stopped laughing when old vehicles entered the lot. Security guards stopped judging workers by shoes, uniforms, or accents. Executives began visiting small suppliers instead of only luxury partners. And in the main lobby, near the entrance where Vivian had first mocked Elias, a wooden display case was installed. It had been made by Bennett and Sons. Inside, it was not a trophy, not a contract, not a luxury item. It was Mila's drawing, the one of Elias, Mila, and the old truck under the yellow sun. Under it, a small bronze plaque read, "Greatness often arrives, dressed in humility." Months later, Elias still drove the same old truck. Vivian had offered to buy him a new one. He had politely refused. Mila had not. "Dad," she said one afternoon, "if a billionaire offers a new truck, maybe we should at least test drive it." Elias laughed. "Trader, I'm practical. You're 8. I'm advanced." They were driving home from school, the sun glowing orange across the windshield. Mila held a certificate in her lap. She had won a writing contest with an essay titled, "The Richest Man I Know." Elias had tried not to cry when she read it aloud. He failed. As they passed Sterling Global, Mila pointed. "Look." Near the entrance, employees were gathered around a small outdoor event. A banner read, "Clara, Rowan, Initiative, First Year, Celebration." Vivian stood near a group of single parents, craftsmen, and children receiving education grants. When she saw the truck, she smiled, not the cold smile from before. "Ariel won." Mila waved wildly from the passenger seat. Vivian waved back. "Can we stop?" Mila asked. Elias hesitated. He still disliked attention. But then he saw a young father standing near the entrance, holding a toddler in one arm and a toolbox in the other. The man looked nervous, as if he did not quite believe he belonged there. Elias recognized that feeling, so he turned the truck into the parking lot. This time, no one laughed. A security guard stepped forward and opened the gate with respect. "Good afternoon, Mr. Rowan." Elias nodded. "Good afternoon." When he parked, Vivian walked over. "Mila," she said warmly, "I heard about your writing contest." Mila beamed. Dad cried, "Elias Sile." "Thank you for announcing that." Vivian laughed softly. Then she looked at Elias. "We helped 37 small businesses this year. 12 single parents started new careers. 84 children received school support." Elias listened quietly. "That's good," he said. Vivian shook her head. "It started with you." "No," Elias said, looking at the families around them. "It started when someone finally stopped looking down." Vivian accepted that. For a while, they stood together in silence as children ran across the grass and parents talked beneath white tents. Then the young father with the toolbox approached Elias. "Excuse me," he said nervously. "Are you Mr. Rowan?" "Yes." The man swallowed. "I just wanted to say thank you. My daughter starts school next month because of this program. I almost lost my repair shop last winter. The grant kept us open." Elias looked at the little girl in the man's arms. She was holding a toy truck. His eyes softened. "What's your name?" "Daniel." Elias offered his hand. "Daniel, when business gets hard, remember this. Don't let shame make decisions for you. Ask for help before you break." Daniel nodded, eyes wet. Vivian watched the exchange, and in that moment, she understood something clearly. Elias had never needed Sterling Global to honor him. Sterling Global had needed Elias to remind it how to be human. Before the evening ended, Vivian stepped onto a small platform. Cameras were present, but fewer than before. This time, the event was not designed to impress investors. It was designed to thank people who rarely heard thank you. Vivian looked at the crowd. "1 year ago, I made a mistake," she said. "I judged a man by the truck he drove. I mistook simplicity for failure. I mistook silence for weakness. And I mistook wealth for worth." The crowd grew quiet. "That man taught me that the richest people are not always the ones with the largest bank accounts. Sometimes, they are the ones who give without needing credit, sacrifice without needing applause, and love without needing the world to notice." She turned toward Elias. He looked uncomfortable, but Mila squeezed his hand. Vivian continued. "Elias Rowan asked for only one thing: that children helped through this program should have the chance to dream beyond their circumstances." Mila looked up at her father. "That sounds like Mom," she whispered. Elias nodded. "It does." Vivian smiled gently. "So today, we renew that promise." Applause rose across the courtyard. Elias did not step forward. He did not make a speech. He did not accept an award. He simply held Mila's hand and looked at the families smiling around him. That was enough. Later, as the sun began to set, Elias and Mila returned to the old truck. Vivian walked with them. "Are you sure about the new truck?" she asked. Mila opened her mouth. Elias covered her ears playfully. "We're sure." Mila pulled his hand away. "We are not completely sure." Vivian laughed. Elias looked at the truck. It scratched paint glowing softly in the sunset. "One day," he said, "maybe. But not because I'm ashamed of this one." Vivian nodded. "I understand." Elias opened the passenger door for Mila. Before getting in, Mila turned to Vivian. "Do you know why Dad likes this truck?" Vivian smiled. "Because it carries memories?" Mila nodded seriously. "And because Mom rode in it." Vivian's expression softened. "Yes," she said. "That makes it very special." Mila climbed inside. Elias closed the door gently. Before he walked around to the driver's side, Vivian stopped him. "Elias." He turned. "Thank you for letting me learn from my mistake." Elias looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Just make sure someone else benefits from it." Vivian nodded. "They will." Elias got into the truck. The engine coughed, rattled, and finally started. Mila laughed from inside. "Angry dragon." Elias smiled. The truck rolled slowly out of the Sterling Global parking lot, past the glass towers, past the luxury cars, past the entrance where people had once laughed. But this time, employees stopped and watched with respect. Vivian stood near the gate until the truck disappeared into the warm evening light. She finally understood that the old pickup had never been a symbol of failure. It was a symbol of loyalty, of fatherhood, of grief survived, of love carried forward, and of a man wealthy enough in spirit to save an empire, then drive away without asking the world to clap. As Elias and Mila drove home, the sky turned gold above the city. Mila leaned against the window, humming softly, her school certificate resting in her lap. "Dad," she said. "Yes, sweetheart? Are we rich?" Elias looked at the road ahead. He thought of Clara. He thought of the families helped. He thought of the old truck beneath his hands and his daughter beside him. Then he smiled. "Yes," he said quietly, "in all the ways that matter." The old truck carried them home beneath the fading sun, and behind them, Sterling Global's glass tower reflected the golden light, no longer looking quite as cold as before. Before we end, please leave a comment with the words, "Kindness is the greatest wealth." Tell us where you are watching from and what lesson touched your heart the most. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to Single Dad Journey. Your support helps us continue sharing powerful stories about kindness, humility, second chances, and the quiet people whose hearts are bigger than their bank accounts.